Scotland is bounded by England to the south, the Atlantic Ocean to the west and north, and the North Sea to the east. The west coast is fringed by deep indentations and by numerous islands, varying in size from mere rocks to the large landmasses of Lewis and Harris, Skye, and Mull. The island clusters of Orkney and Shetland lie to the north. At its greatest length, measured from Cape Wrath to the Mull of Galloway, the mainland of Scotland extends 274 miles, while the maximum breadth, measured from Applecross, in the Western Highlands, to Buchan Ness, in the eastern Grampian Mountains, is 154 miles. But, because of the deep penetration of the sea in the sea lochs and firths estuaries, most places are within 40 to 50 miles of the sea, and only 30 miles of land separate the Firth of Clyde and the Firth of Forth, the two great estuarine inlets on the west and east coasts, respectively. Scotland is traditionally divided into three topographic areas: the Highlands in the north, the Midland Valley, and the southern uplands. Low-lying areas extend through the Midland Valley and along the greater part of the eastern seaboard. The east coast contrasts with the west in its smoother outline and thus creates an east-west distinction in topography as well as a north-south one. The Highlands are bisected by the fault line of Glen More, which is occupied by a series of lakes, the largest of which is Loch Ness, famous for its probably mythical monster. North of Glen More is an ancient plateau, which, through long erosion, has been cut into a series of peaks of fairly uniform height separated by glens carved out by glaciers. The northwestern fringe of the mainland is particularly barren, the rocks of the Lewisian complex having been worn down by severe glaciation to produce a hummocky landscape, dotted by small lochs and rocks protruding from thin, acidic soil. The landscape is varied by spectacular Torridonian sandstone mountains, weathered into sheer cliffs, rock terraces, and pinnacles. Southeast of Glen More are the Grampian Mountains, though there are intrusions such as the granitic masses of the Cairngorm Mountains. The Grampians are on the whole less rocky and rugged than the mountains of the northwest, being more rounded and grassy with wider plateau areas. But many have cliffs and pinnacles that provide challenges for mountaineers, and the area contains Britain's highest mountains, reaching a maximum elevation of 4,406 feet at Ben Nevis. There are some flatter areas, the most striking being Rannoch Moor, a bleak expanse of bogs and granitic rocks, with narrow, deep lochs such as Rannoch and Erricht. The southeastern margin of the Highlands is clearly marked by the Highland Boundary Fault, running northeast to southwest from Stonehaven, just south of Aberdeen, to Helensburgh on the River Clyde and passing through Loch Lomond, Scotland's largest stretch of inland water. The southern boundary of the Midland Valley is not such a continuous escarpment, but the fault beginning in the northeast with the Lammermuir and Moorfoot Hills and extending to Glen App, in the southwest, is a distinct dividing line. In some ways the label lowlands is a misnomer, for, although this part of Scotland is low by comparison with adjoining areas, it is by no means flat. The landscape includes hills such as the Sidlaws, the Ochils, the Campsies, and the Pentlands, composed of volcanic rocks rising as high as 1,898 feet. The southern uplands are not as high as the Highlands. Glaciation has produced narrow, flat valleys separating rolling mountains. To the east of Nithsdale the hills are rounded, gently sloping, and grass-covered, providing excellent grazing for sheep, and they open out along the valley of the lower Tweed into the rich farming land of the Merse. To the west of Nithsdale the landscape is rougher, with granitic intrusions around Loch Doon, and the soil is more peaty and wet. The high moorlands and hills, reaching up to 2,766 feet at Merrick, are also suitable for sheep farming. The uplands slope toward the coastal plains along the Solway Firth in the south and to the Machair and the Mull of Galloway farther west. Uplift and an eastward tilting of the highlands some 50 million years ago formed a watershed near the west coast. As a result, most rivers drain eastward, but deeply glaciated rock basins in the northern highlands form numerous large locks. There are fewer locks in the Grampian Mountains, although the area contains the large locks of Ericht, Rannoch, and Tay. Well-graded rivers such as the Dee, the Don, and the Spey meander eastward and northeastward to the North Sea. The Tay and Forth emerge from the southern Grampians to flow out of the eastern lowlands in two large estuaries. The Clyde and the Tweed both rise in the southern uplands, the one flowing west into the Firth of Clyde and the other east into the North Sea, while the Nith, the Annan, and a few other rivers run south into the Solway Firth. Locks are numerous in the highlands, ranging from moraine-dammed lochans in mountain quarries to large and deep locks filling rock basins. In the lowlands and the southern uplands, locks are shallower and less numerous. Lower elevations, up to about 1,500 feet, were once covered with natural forests, which have been cleared over the course of centuries and replaced in some areas by trees, plants, and crops. Survivals of the original forest are found sporadically throughout the highlands, for example, in the pinewoods of Rothiamerchis in the Spey Valley. Grass and heather cover most of the Grampians and the southern uplands, where the soil is not so wet and dank as in the northwestern highlands. Shrubs such as bearberry, crowberry, and blaeberry grow on peaty soil, as does bog cotton. Alpine and Arctic species flourish on the highest slopes and plateaus of the Grampians, including saxifrages, creeping azalea, and dwarf willows. Ben Lawers is noted for its plentiful mountain flora. Scotland is rich in animal life for its size. Herds of red deer graze in the corries and remote glens. Although formerly woodland dwellers, they are now found mainly on higher ground, but roe deer still inhabit the woods, along with sika and fallow deer in some areas. Foxes and badgers are widespread, but the Scottish wildcat has become critically endangered as a result of disease and interbreeding with domestic cats. Rabbits were once decimated by the disease myxomatosis but have largely recovered to earlier numbers. Pine marten, otters, and mountain and brown hares are among other wild mammals. A few ospreys nest in Scotland, and golden eagles, buzzards, peregrine falcons, and kestrels are the most notable of resident birds of prey. The red grouse, the Scottish subspecies of the willow grouse, has long been hunted for sport. Other species of grouse include the ptarmigan, found only at higher elevations, and the large capercaillie, which has been reintroduced into Scotland's pine woodlands. Large numbers of seabirds, such as gannets, fulmars, guillemots, and gulls, breed on cliffs and on the stacks around the magnificent coasts. More than one-third of the world's Atlantic, or grey, seals breed in Scottish waters, especially around the northern and western isles, as do numerous common seals. Dolphins and porpoises are regularly seen in Wales occasionally, especially on the west coast. Stay tuned this the channel. We will glad see you next time.